It is the WEA type first debuted in Medarot 8 with 3 prototypes to perfect the final design. It is WEA03 Death Providence, with a kit of Charge Buster, Press, Power Rifle, Multi-Legs, and the Super Armor leg ability, which passively renders the user immune to paralyze ailments, which includes Shock, Freeze, and I believe Tornado also is applied in this, a set number of times relative to the leg's part rank, so naturally up to 5. Now, much like other weapon types before him, Death Providence and all 3 of his prototypes sport a very high damage potential, not necessarily as Metaforce reliant as his predecessors might be, but naturally with Death Providence himself being the final prototype and the final product of the 3 prototypes preceding him, he also does have the highest base damage potential, highest armor, and best overall performance compared to the other 3. Charge Buster is a Metaforce reliant conventional shooting attack that draws upon the Metaforce charge for additional damage bonus relative to the percentage of your charge. But upon use, it will also consume a small amount of charge. At 5-star, that consumes about 5% for each time that you use it. So naturally, pairing that off with a Hunter or Sniper Nature Metal, and then at a high charge will very easily overcome this weakness, so even breaking one part will still net you a little bit of a charge gauge profit when you're making use of it. Press is a gravity-based attribute skill that is good for heavy punish, but it is the non-pierce damage variant, so it is good for spot nuking, especially the punish towards anyone that is using 2 or more heavy parts, 3 naturally being the best recommendation for the best damage deal out. Power Rifle is probably going to be the best part on him for the most conventional and most consistent damage, as a standard shooting attack, but also gets a times 1.5 damage bonus as long as the user's legs are intact, which works very well to Death Providence advantage because of the fact that he is very naturally tanky, as much of quite literally a walking fortress in this case. Basically, as denoted, if you couldn't already tell by his design, very thick armor, very heavy armor, but also a very high damage bonus. As a pure set score, I would rate him a pretty solid 7.5 out of 10, but unfortunately he does also suffer from the same weaknesses primarily that Beastmaster does, in the sense that he is Metaforce reliant, but does not necessarily have that Metaforce sustain in his kit to really make use of the best between Press and Charge Buster, instead relying on the Power Rifle for his consistent damage when he's not using either of the other 2. However, he does make use of it and make up for it very well with the Super Armor leg ability, which does allow him passive immunity to paralyze ailments, which means that he will not be very easily stopped, stunned, or paralyzed, which allow him to march forward and continue punishing anyone that does stand in his way. Unfortunately, he still does suffer from the triple heavy issue, meaning if his legs do go out, Death Providence does sit on the, basically sit where he's at in his heat or cooldown phase until the legs are restored or until he goes down. One other thing to note is that Death Providence, I believe, also is a gender N type bot, meaning that his parts can be used on either model, I believe, so to better fit anyone that is in need of those high-end parts, male or female. As mixed parts, I would rate him a very solid 8 out of 10, for the fact that for the high damage deal out he has and the high base armor, he makes up for his weaknesses relatively easily with the Power Rifle for his consistent damage paired off with a good metal, and the Super Armor leg ability on his legs does allow him to continue marching forward without anything really hindering him or standing in his way, sans say maybe Virus or Canceller. That may be the one thing that does hold him back.